to Grid Live Wrap Up. MotoGP has a brand new world champion. The Martinator claims the championship. The Supercar Series ends with controversy and the champion winning the race. I'm Joe San Diego, Joshua Burks from Joshua Burks Motorsports, and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. Join me on Grid Live Wrap Up on this beautiful noonday Sunday. Thank you for calling the show. Mark Ron, David Matthew for investing in the Grid Network. You too can have your name on the Patreon list. Link in the video description. Invest in the Grid Network each and every month. You can also do one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. And we'll thank you on the air. Kobe, let's get started. MotoGP, where people are talking about the champion and the difference between race wins between first place and second place.
Yeah, and we do have a new champion, as you said. The 2024 MotoGP World Champion is Jorge Martin, the 26-year-old rider from Spain who finished third earlier today at Barcelona. The pragmatic Ducati rider prevented Pecco Bagnaia from claiming a third consecutive World Championship. Bagnaia ended up winning the Solidarity Grand Prix with Marc Marquez, his future teammate for 2025, finishing in second place. So in this championship battle, we had an independent rider beat the factory rider for the championship. And starting with you, Josh, how will you remember Jorge Martin's championship winning season?
I think he started out, they both have started off, in my opinion, as they were only champions because they stayed on the bikes. I think Jorge Martin in the last few races has shown me enough to say that he is a deserving world champion. It's like he flicked a switch and he suddenly got a lot of maturity in him. So it's been a really impressive ride. It's been a fantastic season. The drama, the highs and the lows, and the battling they've had. It's two moments. Well, actually, no. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, internet's having a bit of an issue. I'm going to swap over in a second as well when you come back to me for the next question. Three things out to me. One, the moon. No, I'm not. Yeah, is it working? Yeah, come back to me. I'm having loads of problems. I'm cutting out.
A lot of drama this season. The championship battle, the championship, nobody seems to want to win at one point, where they kept crashing. Sprint race, Grand Prix, sprint race, Grand Prix. It's one of those deals where finally we started seeing a championship run from Pecco Bagnaia. That's a little too late. And Jorge Martin, the consistency was there. Another thing that really stood out as well from this championship battle, Jorge Martin on a 1-year-old bike. It shows how good this Ducati bike is. And really, and this is something I'm curious to hear from Josh since he's back with us, Josh. When it comes to Ducati, the last year's bike was good. This year's bike seems to be good. Is there much room for improvement for Ducati?
Yeah, sorry about that. The computer's having a paddy after Macau and MotoGP today. So, Davide Dardozzi was speaking with TNT Sports in the build-up to the Grand Prix, and he said they've made some updates, although they were puzzled about where the bike could possibly go for 2025. So it's a small update, and he doesn't know yet whether it's a big update or a small update. They're not going to run it on Tuesday's test. That's all about getting Mark set up on the 24 bike. And then I think it's going to be Bagnaia testing the new aero package for next year. The actual big bike won't be seen until the Sepang test in February. So it's little bits of development, little bits of upgrades. We're expecting the aero package to be roughly the same, but all the boost for the 25 bike is going to come from electronics. It's going to come from a new ride height system as well. And it's also going to come from a new ability to not cook the tyres that we've seen a couple of times this year. So Ducati are going to update it. And hopefully the GP25 is a step up and improvement. What they need to do is stop that front tyre from overheating and causing all the crashes.
Yes, for sure. And one record, well, actually, before we move on from this, I actually want to say I think it's very impressive what Jorge Martin was able to do this season over Pecco Bagnaia. As we mentioned, being an independent rider, winning this championship over the factory Ducati. That's something you don't really see all the time in this style of races. So definitely quite a drive for Martin this season. I agree with you, Josh, that he is most definitely a deserving MotoGP World Champion this year. And now moving on, one record that Bagnaia set this year was becoming the first rider in MotoGP history to have 11 wins and not win the championship. The sprint races were his weakness compared to Martin, who excelled in those, and Martin only won 3 Grand Prix races. the two tied for the number of podium finishes at 16 each out of 20 races. Martin finished in the top 2 spots 13 times compared to Bagnaia's 12 top 2 finishes. In the season when many felt neither rider wanted to win the championship with crashes and mistakes, Martin showed how important those sprints were. Joe, what are your thoughts on Bagnaia not taking the championship despite more Grand Prix wins than all the other riders combined this year?
It's so interesting because we're going to talk about, Martin being the champion, remembering the season. And I feel it's going to be forgotten that Pecco Bagnaia got 11 wins this year. Yes, we know this is the second year with the sprint format. All the riders knew the rules. I mean, we saw Pecco Bagnaia. He was a good sportsman today. But I just got to feel like you just know it's like you got the pace, you got the bike. In a traditional season, as you said yesterday, Josh, this championship would have been over 3 or 4 races early. But now with the sprint races, this just adds another element. And I guess now it's sort of a debate for MotoGP. Do they want something like this to happen again, where the rider more wins than all the other riders combined this year doesn't get the championship, or do you want something like this to ensure you have a championship battle in the last race? Because I will be honest, having a championship battle at the end of the season is always something that gets people excited. But is this something where it comes at this expense? I just don't know. It's something where it's a dubious record for Pecco Bagnaia to have. You got 11 wins, but nobody's going to remember that. They're going to remember Jorge Martin's first championship.
Yeah, I'll back up on that, actually, because did anyone else feel that it didn't feel like a title decider today? It didn't feel that energy and that spark, because nobody was actually challenging for the championship. Bagnaia was doing all he could do, and Martin was happy and safe enough with a 3rd place. So neither of them needed to really push, and they all knew it was sort of done. It was only Mark giving us a brilliant example. Just to circle back to that first question that Kobe, you mentioned, the 3 things for me that stand out for Jorge Martin this year. 1, his move in Buriram on the inside of Pecco. That was superb championship maneuver. 2, the battle he had in Malaysia with him and Bagnaia for the opening 4 laps. Even though he didn't come out on top in that one, it still showed that he was determined to race, and he can race. And 3, when he crossed that line, the emotion just flooded out, and he was in tears on the exit as well. So that's my 3 moments from him. Definitely, I think, a deserving champion. But I think Martin's been the most improved rider between the 2 of them over the season as well. Bagnaia's just made too many mistakes. And to circle back to this question, that's what people are going to remember him for this year. Not the 2 championships he's won in 22 and 23, but the amount of mistakes that means he's lost the championship in 24, crashed so many times, so many lost points, so many crucial and critical moments have gone down. And it's mainly been in the sprint races. And that's where Martin soared. Martin has gained all these points in the sprints. He's been on the podium 16 times this year, and now 17. And we've had 11 victories for Pecco. So it's mad. And I think for MotoGP to try and avoid this in the future, there's no really way they can. They've opened up the lion's den now, and Pandora's box well and truly can't put the lid back on. It's now, we've got sprints. They're going to decide a championship at one point. We've already seen it in Formula One, and it's going to be pretty much how close can you get. Next year, with everybody all over the place, I'm expecting that to play a bit more of a factor, because every point is going to matter. With the Ducati strong Super 8 being split up and spread to all different teams, everybody stands a chance next year. And with the engines being frozen as well going in 26, it's just going to continue getting closer and closer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, as fans and viewers of MotoGP and people who cover the sport like we do, that's only great for all of us, because we'll get to enjoy more parity. Won't see anyone running away for the championship. And like you said, Josh, every point is going to matter. And Josh, you weren't on when Joe and I talked about this, but we liken the points you get from the sprint races to the stage points. We see in NASCAR that it all matters and all of that. And when you look at it on paper, and you see that Pecco Bagnaia has 11 Grand Prix race wins, and then you have Jorge Martin, who only have 3. You're wondering how on earth did he lose the championship, winning so many races. But the thing is, with Jorge Martin, on our grid tonight shows, when we're doing the pick one, we always call him the king of the sprints, and that's basically what it came down to. Pecco Bagnaia, wasn't as strong as Jorge Martin when it came to the sprint races, and that's really what made the difference was Jorge Martin showing up on Saturdays and getting the job done. Yeah, Pecco Bagnaia, was a lot stronger in the Grand Prix, but at the end of the day, Martin was very consistent with getting those points, getting those wins, getting those good finishes on Saturday, and that ultimately is why he is this year's MotoGP World Champion. And some people may not like all the sprint race. I remember we didn't really like it at first because it was putting a lot of wear and tear on the riders. But now it seems like people are like, it is what it is now, and this is a system that they have, and people may not be happy that an 11-time race winner this year end up losing the championship to someone who only won 3 times, but Jorge Martin played the system, to his advantage, and more power to him on this. Was there anything you wanted to add, Josh?
Yeah, to put it into comparison, that's 11 Grand Prix victories in effectively 40 races, and he has won about 6 sprints, so that's about 17 out of the 40 has been won by Pecco. And if you look at the other way around, Martin has, I think, won 15 out of the 40. So it's those sprints again that keeps closing up as well. And it's just constantly dragging. But yeah, the stats this year are balmy to look back. If people are going to look back on this season and say, well, he should have won. And then they're going to go, why didn't he win? And then they're going to rewatch it. And then they'll go, oh, that's why he didn't win it. And that's the legacy that Pecco's going to leave behind at the moment. Not as a 2-time world champion, but as the man who threw it away too many times and was not consistent enough. And that's not a legacy because Pecco is a good rider, but I don't think we're going to see it until next year when he faces Marc Marquez.
Yeah, for sure. Highly anticipated driver lineup at the Ducati factory team next year. Really excited to see Bagnaia go up against Marc Marquez in 2025. And as we close out the 2024 MotoGP season, here are some stories that really stand out. The champion, Jorge Martin, is going to Aprilia, a manufacturer that only won a single race this year. So I guess considering how Aprilia has been performing, it would be a major surprise to see Jorge Martin defend his championship next year. And Marc Marquez officially back to his old self. And like we just said, going to the Ducati factory team. Pedro Acosta, the super rookie, he's joining Brad Binder at KTM. Miguel Oliveira and Raul Fernandez got Trackhouse racing the American team. Some top 10 finishes this year. Honda and Yamaha have nothing for Aprilia, Ducati, and KTM, despite both teams having a past world champion. And neither Juan Mir or Luca Marini scored a top 10 finish for Repsol Honda this year. And speaking of Repsol, they're leaving Honda, ending a 30-year title sponsorship role. Josh, heading into 2025, what do you think the biggest story that's going to carry over in the next year?
Definitely Vinales now being alongside a new team at KTM. That's going to be quite fun to see. I think him leaving, that's going to be a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't expect it coming through. But he was done at Aprilia, so kind of makes sense. He's looking to become another rider to win on and get another manufactured bike. He's going to go to Gas, which is the KTM Tech 3 team, and he's going to be on a factory bike for 25. So if he can do that, he wins then on Suzuki, Yamaha, Aprilia. Then he could do it on KTM. That's the 4. And of course, there's 2 others that he needs to get, which is with Honda and Ducati. Danny's going to get that with Ducati, but still, that's an impressive margin. He is the only rider in history to do that. I think the fact that we're going to see that Aprilia run the number 1 is going to be quite an ego boost for them. It's a bit like Arrows running it with Damon Hill in 1997. That's how you've got to think about it, although Aprilia are a much more winning team than Arrows was, and they're more competitive with it. Aleix, to me, demonstrated why he shouldn't be leaving today. He was up there battling hard, racing hard, and proving he'd still got it. If he's on a top bike, he would be a champion, no doubt about it. Aleix is sort of a late bloomer like Fernando Alonso. And I think the biggest story is definitely going to be Marc Marquez, finally back on a factory bike that can win a championship, that can win multiple Grand Prix. He's shown what he's done this year. He said, if I didn't get that seat, I would have probably retired. And if I wasn't with Gresini on the satellite team this year, I wouldn't have had my love back for motorcycle racing. He's got that love back now. Definitely the biggest story going into next year, and technically Tuesday, when we start testing, is going to see Marc on a factory Ducati bike in the red. And how is he going to get along with Pecco Bagnaia? It is going to be an amazing season. And I can't wait for it to get started on Tuesday and get a little taster about what's going to happen for 2025.
That's going to be exciting to see what happens between those two. The one I'm really going to be excited about, Jorge Martin with Aprilia. What can he do? it's going to be interesting once he has a number one on the Aprilia, assuming he goes with the number one, the marketing and everything. But is this going to be a defending champion? We're going to say he's bringing the fight to the Ducatis or whoever else shows up? Or is this, yeah, he's a defending champion, but he doesn't have much, like I would say almost like a Juan Mir, where his defense of this championship in 2021 was just nothing. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And then Repsol leaving Honda. That's just going to be so weird. As long as I could remember, that Honda has always had the Repsol livery. Of course, Repsol is a Spanish-based petroleum company. See them gone. I just feel like that sort of identity of MotoGP a little bit gone, because you think of MotoGP, at some point you think of, and the Repsol bike, Honda. Now it's going to be Castrol Oil. Let's see how that partnership works, but that's just something that's still 30 years of sponsorship gone.
I'll tell you one thing. Expect that Repsol to appear somewhere else in the paddock and follow a certain rider. Maybe not for next year, but for 2026, just watch that turn up somewhere else.
Yeah, I like the liken Repsol leaving Honda to FedEx and in its partnership with Denny Hamlin at number 11, because for so many years, Denny Hamlin was driving that number 11, sponsored by FedEx, and it's going to feel weird next year not seeing them on his number 11 Toyota in the NASCAR Cup Series. And I'll have to say, can you blame Repsol for leaving Honda, considering how poorly they've been performing? I'm sure Marc Marquez is glad he wasn't on one of their bikes this year, because if he was, it would have been really, really bad. And the thing I'm going to be following the most next year is Jorge Martin going to Aprilia. Like, how is he going to perform on a bike that, that hasn't shown the same capabilities as the Ducati that he's leaving? I'm afraid Jorge Martin might suffer the same fates as Juan Mir and Fabio Quartararo. I know those two have not forgotten how to ride bikes in MotoGP, but unfortunately, just like any other racing series we see, it depends on what car you're in. In this case, it depends on what bike you're on. And if you're not on a bike that's good enough like the Ducatis, you're not going to be competitive, no matter how good of a talent you are. And also the same in Formula One. If you put Max Verstappen in a Visa Cash App RB car, he's not going to be going out there to compete for wins and world championships. Regardless of how good he is, it just wouldn't be possible. And this is what we've seen with Juan Mir and Fabio Quartararo. And then I'm concerned Jorge Martin is going to, fall in the same trap where, despite him being an extremely talented rider, he's not going to be able to, do what he did on the bike this year with Aprilia. So definitely going to be interesting following all of these storylines next year. And you have something you wanted to add, Josh?
Yeah, for that, I've just looked over at my timing screen because everything's still on in here, and it's now saying session 1, 8 hours for 2025. And just looking down at the full order, it's really strange to see Marc Marquez, Ducati Lenovo team, Johan Zarco, Castrol. The Repsol name has now gone, and Luca Marini's in there. It's weird seeing it. And actually, we've been given the list then. This has only just come out, so they won't even know going home. So I'll read you them out, because this is a bit of a breaking news for us. We get to see who's testing what. The entry list usually gets delivered to us tomorrow. So it's Bagnaia, Zarco, Marini, Vinales, and Vinales is on the Tech 3. Quartararo, Morbidelli, who's now moved over to the VR46 team. Then we've got Bastianini on the Tech 3, Raul Fernandez, Brad Binder, Somkat Chantra is going to be testing, and he's going to be on the Honda LCR team. Then we get Juan Mir, Pedro Acosta on the factory KTM. Aleix Espargaro apparently is going to be testing. So Aleix is at least going to do some 2025 prep. He's doing the postseason test, according to this, on the Honda HRC team for Aleix, as he takes up his new role, of course. No longer with Aprilia, goes to the HRC as its test rider. So he's going to be doing that. Alex Rins is going to be racing. So is Jack Miller on the Pramac Racing. That now becomes Yamaha. Mikel Pirro is now going to be with VR46 doing it. Fermin Aldeguer comes up from Moto2. He's going to be with Grassini. Marco Bezzecchi is going to go down as well with Aprilia. Then we get Alex Marquez on Grassini. Ayagura steps up, the Moto2 champion, to Trackhouse. Miguel Oliveira goes to Pramac. Jorge Martin with Aprilia, and Marc Marquez with Ducati. So that's your entry list. And I can tell you now, nobody else in the world knows that, because the entry list will not been released as to who exactly is going to ride. And that's ready for Tuesday. So a world first here on the Grid Network.
Yeah, a special unexpected Grid Network exclusive. And Josh, I know you have to get going soon, but before you go, I want to give you a chance to give your Grid One Shining moment from this racing weekend.
Working with Lizzie Whitmore in the commentary box. That's an easy one. Lizzie joined us for the final race. She was supposed to be with us alongside Julia for the motorcycle Macau Grand Prix. That unfortunately got cancelled. So literally, I texted her at midnight and said, "Do you want to do MotoGP instead? Because this race is cancelled." And she said, "I can't say it on air." You can use your imagination. What swear word came before yes to come in? So she came in. She was really happy, and she's now doing some Formula Ones with us at the end of the season as well. I think she's even coming in for Vegas. So brilliant working with her. From a point of view of motor racing, I think it's definitely gone to the fantastic championship for Jorge Martin. To me, has shown that he's a champion in the last 5 minutes. I think that's been the best one. You guys, though, have had fun with Supercars down under as well at Adelaide. Another race I wanted to cover, but Macau going directly with it, couldn't cover it. Maybe next year.
There was Macau. There was Adelaide. There was also on Friday some boxing match. I don't know who, somebody up in their age and a young comer, whatever. Netflix apparently.
Did you see it?
Had issues, but a lot of racing. And Joshua, thank you so much for your time. Again, encourage everyone, link in the video description to Joshua Birch Motorsports. 2024 Repco Supercars Championship season ended with an exciting final race this year in Adelaide Saturday, while AAA Red Bull Ample Race teammates Broc Feeney won race 1. Will Brown, second place, good enough to clinch the championship with one race remaining. Brown entered race 2, able to be racing stress-free, but he endured a stressful moment early on when he got turned around by Brody Kostecki, the defending champion, spitting out the brand new champion. The irony with that, of course, after that, Brown was running at the very back of the pack and had to drive all this way through the field. As Brown started picking up off his competitor one by one, the battle up front for the win was fierce between Broc Feeney, Chas Monster. The two of them ran into trouble during the battle, which resulted in a crushing time penalty for Feeney and left rear damage for Monster. With Feeney facing a 30-second time penalty and Monster trying to nurse a wounded car to the finish, the champion, Brown, made easy pass on Monster and was close enough to Feeney to inherit his 5th and final win of the season. Entering this year, Brown joined Triple Eight Racing with huge expectations of driving for Supercars' top team and the pressure of replacing one of the all-time greats and past grid ranking world champion, Shane Van Gisbergen. Kobe, how impressed were you by Will Brown's comeback drive from an early race spin and his championship-winning season?
Well, I guess the contact between his with his former teammate Brody Kostecki was a championship passing of the torch there, being like, I'm the past champion, you this year's champion, so I'm just gonna nug you around, just pass the torch there. But I was extremely impressed for Will Brown's comeback drive, because when I saw Brody turn him around, I was thinking, oh well, Will Brown's not winning this race, it's over, because usually, when these supercars races, stay green from lights to flag, you really think, that once you get turned around, you're not going to have a chance to go out there and win the race. And like everybody else, we're like, yep, Will Brown's day is over. The best thing he can do is, just go out there, get the best finish he can. Even the broadcasters were saying that Will Brown's, was just going to try to have fun the rest of the day and pick off as many as he could. But nobody would have expected that Will Brown would have come through the field to win the race. It was honestly a spectacular drive, probably the drive of the weekend from any of the racing series that we covered, because this car was just extremely fast, and it showed Will Brown was picking off one by one, and obviously he had a little help there, with the contact between Feeney and Monster, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, because without that contact, Will Brown wasn't going to get there and win the race, so he had a little help, but all in all, still a really fantastic drive from him, and he showed exactly why he was this year's champion, because that was a championship winning drive that he put in. And looking at his championship winning season as a whole, I think Will Brown grew up a lot this season. He proved a lot of doubters wrong, including me. I didn't doubt his move to AAA, but the only thing I doubted with Will Brown was his ability to close and finish out a season. on a high note without falling apart last year when he was in the championship battle with his then teammate Brody Kostecki at Airbus Motorsport. It was him and Kostecki, heading into the second half of the season. And early in the second half of the season, Brody Kostecki held it together and, did what he needed to do. But while Will Brown completely fell apart with mistakes. And I was wondering, going to a top team like AAA and replacing Shane Van Gisbergen, this was a lot of pressure on Will Brown. I think he handled it as well as he possibly could have. And to see how he ran very consistently down the stretch this year, it showed that he learned from his mistakes last season, that he is that championship caliber driver. And it would not surprise me if we see Will Brown win multiple Supercars championships throughout his entire career. So really nice to see the year-to-year growth we saw from Will Brown last year, collapsing down the stretch to this year, doing what he needed to do by remaining consistent and limiting those mistakes, and then sealing it with a statement win yesterday.
Big statement win yesterday. Will Brown, from being a driver that, can he live up to the hype? I honestly thought Broc Feeney was going to be the favorite. Will Brown came out swinging, got this championship. Overall, looking back at the incident that helped Will Brown win the second race at Adelaide, it all started in the pits with Feeney and Monster getting their car serviced. Feeney exited his pit box right in front of Monster, and the two made contact. As a result, Feeney issued a 15-second time penalty for unsafe release. But that was only the beginning of the trouble. Of course, knowing about his time penalty, Feeney raced Monster really aggressive for the lead, ended up spinning him out into the wall. I remember even one time locking up the tire, so I initially thought maybe the tire having a flat spot may have caused that. But overall, Feeney hit with that other 15-second time penalty, 30 seconds, ended up finished 7th in the race. Are you surprised, Cody, that Monster didn't let Feeney pass him since they were racing for the win? But there was that penalty looming for Feeney.
Yeah, before I answer that, can we talk about how spectacular that final race of the season was? It was basically a preview of what's to come next year, when they move to this playoff style format. Can you imagine? Monster was in the top 4 in points. Feeney obviously in the top 4 in points. Can you imagine that was the battle for the championship right there next year in Adelaide? Because that was a preview. It was just all out, elbows out race, and it was just extremely aggressive. The drivers were driving exactly like it was the season finale, like I can race you however, and it doesn't really matter because we're going into off-season break anyway. And as one of the broadcasters said, I don't remember who said it, but it said this race has turned into an episode of Wacky Races with a bunch of Dick Dastarleys out there. I thought that was a really cool line there. But yeah, I mean, yes and no. I am surprised that Monster didn't let Feeney pass, but I also understand why he didn't, because like you saw Will Brown slicing and dicing through the field, Broc Feeney's teammate also had a very fast car. So despite that 15-second time penalty, I believe Chaz Monster was in the mind, if I let Broc Feeney by, he could potentially build up that gap to over 15 seconds and still get the race win, because Broc Feeney, he had the pace. I don't know if he had enough laps, but I guess given how fast he was, there was a possibility that he could have gotten up to 15 seconds or more, to try to keep that race win despite the penalty. And I guess Chaz Mostert didn't want that to happen. So that's why he raced him very aggressively. I know it's easy to be like, hey, you're not really racing him, so just let him go. There's no telling what pace Broc Feeney had in that car or what could have potentially happened. So I guess that's why he didn't let him by. But at the end of the day, Chaz Mostert's the racer. He wants to keep the driver who's battling with on the track behind him. So I understand why, he fought as hard as he did, but I'm sure looking at it now, he probably wishes, he just let him go, just let the chips fall for what they were. And I thought Chaz did a really good job at the end there, trying to hold on. Like you mentioned, his tire, Joe, it was going down. And after the race, Chaz was basically saying, I tried to nurse it to the end on 3 tires and all of that. It was really, the tire was really close to going down. He was just struggling there at the end, and he was just a passenger. There was no way he was going to hold off Will Brown there, who was just fabulous in that final stint. But yeah, definitely quite the dramatic ending there between Feeney and Mostert, who ended up getting the penalty there. I'm sure it's obvious disappointment for Broc Feeney, because I think he clearly had the best car in race 2, and for him not to get that race win, definitely a huge disappointment for him. But at least the pace was there, and he also gave us something really crazy to talk about, because I remember watching that battle when it happened live, and then it it was just stunning to see Monster go around there. Definitely quite the dramatic end into the 2024 season.
Very dramatic, and as you said, next season, this new playoff format is going to be something else. Gotta be a lot of excitement. Every point's gonna matter, every position, and of course, the racing action is just gonna be kicked up another notch. Biggest takeaways, one of them at least from the Adelaide 500 race weekend, was the consequences we saw in turn 8 from practice qualifying to the race. Drivers hit the wall there in the supercars and the other support series while racing in Adelaide. Fortunately, a few turns in crash 8, resulting in a couple drivers missing out on some of the race and qualifying for race 1. Richie Stanaway hit the turn 8 wall, was diagnosed with a concussion, ruled him out for Adelaide. Pintright Racing originally wanted in their new signed full-time driver for 2025, Kai Allen, to replace Stanaway for each 250-kilometer race, but the rules don't allow Allen to compete in supercars due to his Super 2 commitment. Similar to Formula 2, drivers wouldn't be allowed to compete in the F2 race and then the F1 race Grand Prix weekend on the same time. As a result, Penrite went with Dale Wood to replace Stanway for race 1. Wood was competing in the Porsche Carrera Cup Series at Adelaide. For race 2, Supercars and Motorsport Australia agreed to waive the rule, allowing Allen to replace Stanway and get a head start on 2025. After Stanway was out for a concussion, Jackson Evans suffered a heavy crash in qualifying for race 2. His car was too badly damaged to continue anyways, so no need for a replacement driver, but Evans became the second driver this weekend to be ruled out with a concussion. Now, Kobe, especially with this turn, they've done everything they can because where that concrete wall is placed, you could have an area where you have more runoff, but it's pavement and you could hit another concrete wall much harder. So they made this the idea. You have less space to go up there and hit it, but the speed they're carrying is still so much. Is it concerning to see not one, but two drivers ruled out with concussions and should supercars again consider changes to turn 8 next year and potentially reevaluate the safety of this generation car, which is the Gen 3 car?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, Joe. And I don't know about you, but I mean, we've seen drivers get ruled out, because of concussions. We've seen it happen in NASCAR, obviously, in IndyCar as well with Simon Pagenaud. But I can't remember the last time I saw not one, but two drivers get ruled out of racing with suffering a concussion on the same weekend. And that's definitely extremely concerning. And looking at turn 8, it was definitely extremely treacherous this week. And like you said, and it just wasn't supercars. It was in Super 2. We saw it in Porsche Carrera Cup. We saw it in the stadium Super Truck, Super Utes. We saw it all across the board where you were seeing drivers in all different categories getting into the wall in turn 8 and crashing hard. I was actually a little surprised that Richie Stanaway suffered a concussion because he hit the wall, but actually it didn't look like a bad hit at all. It looked like, he obviously suffered, quite a bit of damage to the left side, but I didn't really think it was that bad of a hit. And for him to, suffer a concussion after a hit like that was the most surprising thing to me. But Jackson Evans, that was a really nasty, heavy crash. So I'm not surprised he suffered a concussion from that one. But when you look at everything that you just mentioned, Joe, I think Supercars has to look at absolutely everything here, starting with the Gen 3 car, figure out, is there something we can do, to try to make this car safer to decrease the chances of drivers suffering a concussion moving forward, because this is the first incidents we've heard of, with this Gen 3 car of drivers suffering a concussion. So that's definitely a concern. So I'm sure over the offseason, Supercars will probably, look and see what they can possibly do to try to, make these hard hits a little bit softer, next time we come to Adelaide in regards to turn 8. I'm not really sure what more they can do here. Maybe they can try to modify it next year, like with the placement of the barriers, but all in all, this is just a very challenging corner. Do we want to change this corner? It's obviously the most challenging corner on the entire racetrack. And do we want to change this corner? Or do we just want to leave it alone? That's something that Supercars is going to have to look at. I don't really know what more we can do with the circuit here, but Durnay definitely caught a lot of people out. But I really believe that they're probably just going to look at absolutely everything here, because I think anything's on the table. But really hope Richie Stanaway and Jackson Evans will do well recovering from concussions. As we've seen, with Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kurt Busch, Simon Pagenaud, these things are nothing to mess around with. You need to take them extremely seriously. And, kudos to Richie and Jackson for, being honest with their symptoms here and also Supercar medical team as well for deeming them unfit, because it doesn't make sense to put a driver out there when they don't need to be out there. I have a feeling, if this was 10, 15 years ago, you would have seen Richie Stanaway race anyways. You would have seen Jackson Evans out there, even though he didn't necessarily feel his best. So it's also good to see that times are changing here, that we're putting the driver's health at the forefront. And if a driver, is experiencing those concussion-like symptoms, they are not going to race by any means.
The driver's health matters so much. Of course, they're the stars. Everyone wants to come watch race. Nobody wants to see their favorite driver sideline. I gotta agree with you, Kobe. I think they're going to be looking at every possible option. The wall, maybe something to absorb a little bit more of that shock, maybe something with the car. I would hate to think of a chicane or something to slow the cars down before that corner. But in line of safety, every option has to be looked at. And to recap the 2024 season, Triple Eight Racing's back to its dominant ways, taking the drivers and team championships after last year. We saw more parity across the board. Didn't have one driver run away with the championship this season compared to past seasons, Kobe, where we saw Shane Van Gisbergen dominate, Scott McLaughlin. Those two, of course, have gone to bigger careers, IndyCar, NASCAR. Brody Kostecki returned to form throughout the season after a turbulent start to the year where he missed several races with Erebus Motorsports. Now he's going to Dick Johnson Racing in 2025. We also see some changes on the grid next year as longtime veteran Mark Winterbottom, who first race had a little bit of a spin, Tim Slade. Both of them ended their full-time career, while Kai Allen and Cooper Murray are going to be beginning their full-time careers. How will you remember the 2024 Supercar Series season?
Yeah, and I also want to start off by saying that Cooper Murray got into action this weekend at Adelaide unexpectedly after, Jack LeBrock had to fly home with the birth of his child. So definitely wishing Jack LeBrock, the best there. Really exciting moment for him and his family. But looking at the 2024 Supercar season, I think a lot of us over the offseason, with the departure of Shane Van Gisbergen to America to race in NASCAR, and Scott McLaughlin leaving, a few years earlier, we're wondering about the identity of the Supercar series, because whenever you think Supercars, Scott McLaughlin, Shane Van Gisbergen were some of the biggest names that you see. And then after that, a lot of people, would have to think. So SVG and McLaughlin, those are the two names. If you didn't follow Supercars religiously, those were the two names that you knew from Supercars. But after that, some people, had to scratch their heads. I think, Will Brown and Cam Waters coming over to run NASCAR this year, I think that helped put their names on the map internationally. So that'll be two more there. But I think with the racing that we saw this year, I think Supercars is going to be perfectly fine. Have a lot of great talents there. You have the Will Browns, the Broc Feeneys, Chaz Mostert, Cam Waters, Matt Paynes, Thomas Randall's, just a whole bunch of really great drivers. Then you mentioned Kai Allen, Cooper Murray, two up and comers as well. I think the Supercar series is in a really good place. Have a lot of talent coming up through the ranks. So I think in regards to the series identity, I think they're going to be perfectly fine, as we get further out of the SVG and Scott McLaughlin era in the racing series. And Brody Kostecki been quite an interesting story to follow, throughout the season. And remember, before the Supercar season on Grid Tonight, we had like a Brody Kostecki story just about every single week, talking about this saga, how him and Erebus fell apart at the beginning of the season and wasn't able to defend his championship. And it's been nice to see how Brody has come back to the Brody of old as we've gotten deeper into the season. And I think that towards the end, we can say that Brody is officially back and, has a lot of momentum carried into his new team at Dick Johnson Racing next year on one of them Shell V Power Ford Mustangs. And parity, you mentioned it, Joe. Broc Feeney won the most races this year, and guess how many races he won? Broc Feeney won 6 races. Remember the days when you have like Scott McLaughlin, Shane Van Gisbergen winning between 15 to 20 races every year? Just one driver just running away with it, and everybody else, is just living it. He's just in their world, living in it. So to say that Broc Feeney, won the most races at 6, and then you see it spread across the board among other drivers. That's something that the Supercar series has to be really excited about. We're seeing more competition, and now you're not guaranteed a McLaughlin or an SVG victory, every single race weekend like you would see in the past. And even with the Triple Eight drivers with Brown and Feeney, it would be easy to pick them, but they aren't always the one on top now. So I think from a parity standpoint, it's been good to see this in the second year of the Gen 3 car. No, parity's been a problem, for quite a handful of years in this series, and to see it spread out more. And we also got a few surprise winners along the way. So I think that's something really nice to see from the series. And, some of the surprise winners we saw, Nick Percat, who was struggling really badly last season, ended up getting a couple of wins. You saw Andre Heimgartner winning as well, and saw Brody Kostecki after the season that he had, get to win the Bathurst 1000 and get a victory on the Gold Coast. Just a lot of really fun surprises we saw throughout this season. And I think Supercars has a lot of momentum heading into next year, and we'll see how the championship will play out next year when we have this new finals/playoff format that's going to be coming. And if race 2 of Adelaide was an indication of what their so-called championship 4 is going to look like next year, it's going to be really crazy. And like I was saying earlier, can you imagine if what we saw between Mostert and Feeney was for the championship next year? There's a very good chance that might have been for the championship.
That would have been something else. The tensions will be so high. Really curious to see how it's going to all play out. The race in itself is going to be a lot of fun. And of course, we'll be following all the Supercars action right here on the Grid Network. And as you mentioned, some of those names, Shane Van Gisbergen, and especially 2022 Grid Ranking World Champion. Well, let's talk about the 2024 Grid Ranking World Champion, Pecco Bagnaia. He has clinched the Grid Ranking World Championship. He has 11 wins, 6 in podiums, and 20 races, finishing ahead of Jorge Martin with 3 wins and 16 podiums. However, Kobe, this is the first time the Grid Ranking World Champion did not claim their respective series championship. Hasn't happened before. Martin, of course, he got the championship in MotoGP. Today, he still had a mathematical shot at the Grid Ranking World Championship if Pecco crashed and he went out and won. But that didn't happen, so Pecco, Grid Ranking World Champion. Does this add to the debate, at least in MotoGP, about emphasizing winning the Grand Prix over the sprint?
And before I answer this question, we are counting the sprints in the grid ranking, correct?
Yes, we are on a smaller scale. So
yeah, on a smaller scale, and I think that what makes a difference in our ranking. And I think our ranking reflects, on the body of work that Pecco Bagnaia put in throughout the entire season. Like I was saying during our MotoGP segment, I think Pecco Bagnaia arguably, had the stronger season, with all the Grand Prix race victories, and he was okay in the sprint races. But Jorge Martin, that was his bread and butter. He excelled in the sprint format. But it just goes back to show, that for the grid ranking, that the Grand Prix itself was most important, and then the sprint was, it was still important, but not as much. But when you look at the real life championship, the sprint races were extremely important. That it came down to a sprint race weekend or two end up deciding this championship. And I'm sure that all the MotoGP fans out there are going to continue to debate the sprint races, whether we should have them or shouldn't have them. But yeah, it definitely leads to an interesting debate here about the sprints and the Grand Prix, and it's really interesting to see how it played out in real life versus our grid ranking.
Very interesting. The big thing, the way it works with the sprint races, points for the top 3 positions, where in MotoGP they do for the top 8, I believe. And then, of course, the big focus is on the Grand Prix. It's very interesting. I think like what Josh said, he sort of opened this door where if we got a championship that wasn't wrapped up early, how do you adjust it? I just feel, let's see what happens. It might be the same next year. And of course, Liberty Media will be full control of MotoGP. Will Brown, he is currently ahead of Max Verstappen. Now, of course, Will Brown's season is over, but Max Verstappen can still claim 3rd place in the grid ranking. Of course, Will Brown finished his first season with Triple H successful season. Finished on the podium at least once in every race weekend, which is phenomenal. Kobe, to think that every race weekend he stood on the podium one time at least, whether it was a 2 or 3 race weekend. And of course, Bathurst 1000, he was on the podium. Next year, though, we have that new points format, the playoff system, coming to the Supercar Series. I know we talked a little bit about what's going to look like next year. Imagine if Feeney Monster was for the championship. Do you believe Will Brown, with his driving style, can repeat his strong performance again?
I think Will Brown can definitely go out and win the championship again, and being able to do it in year one with Triple Eight. As we've been saying, the ultimate top team in supercars. They're the Hendrick Motorsports of supercars, if you want to call them that as well. You can call them the Team Penske of supercars as well, because of how well they execute and how fast they are on almost any given race week. I know Triple Eight had a few off weekends this year, but I think they got it together down the stretch here, and they ended up doing what they needed to do to claim the drivers and the teams championship. So yeah, I think Will Brown will definitely have the pieces around him to repeat as champion next year. But I also think his teammate Broc Feeney is going to be really hungry as well. We saw how hungry he was when he was racing Chaz Mostert, end up taking him out there from the race win. I think Brock's not going to be satisfied. That he's been with the team for couple of years now, and then you have this new guy come in, Will Brown, win the championship in year one, and if you're Brock, you're not gonna be happy about that, and you're gonna want to go out there and be extra motivated to win the championship. And even when Broc Feeney won the race one on Saturday in Adelaide, the broadcasters were saying that this was a statement win by Broc Feeney, and that his 2025 season begins now with Will Brown, clinching it one race early. And I do think Will Brown will probably be the favorite to repeat next year, but I also think Broc Feeney is going to be up there as well. He's going to come in very hungry next year.
He's going to be hungry. He's going to be going out there trying to get that championship. And of course, Formula One, they still got a championship to decide. It looks like Max Verstappen is going to be claiming that eventually, just a matter of when, not if. World Rally Championship, last race, their championship is going to be decided in the last race between Thierry Neuville, Autonic teammates. Formula One, 3 races to go. Round Japan next up for World Rally Championship. And of course, we're winding down the season here at Grid Network. No encore tomorrow, but you'll be on the air on Grid tonight. So still a lot to talk about. I know Matt, Josh will talk about their hots and nots. Let's end our show with our shiny moments.
Yeah, time for a Grid 1 shining moment from this racing weekend. Well, we had a lot of racing on, whether it was the MotoGP season finale at Barcelona, whether it was Supercars in Adelaide. You also had the Macau Grand Prix as well, so no shortage of action despite the racing season winding down. And let us know down in the chat room, what was the one thing that stood out to you the most from this racing weekend? And Joe, I'll let you go first with your shining moment.
My shining moment, I think it's a pretty simple one. It has to be Jorge Martin claiming the MotoGP World Championship. 2021, he had a serious injury. He came back. He was showing a lot of pace, very fast potential. 2022, I almost feel it was a little bit of a sophomore slump for him. He showed again that fast pace, but would crash out almost too much. Was not a championship contender. Then 2023 arrived. He really started coming together, being a championship contender, but just one too many mistakes against Pecco Bagnaia. This year, especially the last 4 rounds, I feel he has just shown what he can do mistake-free. He raced smart. Yesterday, he was racing hard in Bastianini. Bastianini playing the teammate game for Pecco Bagnaia. After the race, Jorge Martin, with a smile, said, I ran my race, feeling good. One more race, we're going to race it like we always done. He did that today. 3rd place, comfortable, knew he had it done. He said on those closing laps, he was starting to tear up. He knew he was getting there, and he was still composed enough to bring that bike home in 3rd place. Jorge Martin, 2025 champion. He is my shining moment.
Yeah, that's a great shining moment, Joe. But my shining moment is actually not any of the races on our great rank. And I got to give my one shining moment to what we saw at the Macau Grand Prix. And I want to let our viewers know, like, if you watch Grid tonight on Wednesday night, you see our Hots and Knots segment. And I can't even emphasize how close the Macau Grand Prix was to being a major knot on this racing weekend. But the final day of racing, with all the big events, it got saved, although it looked very gloomy early on all throughout the week. Saw lots of red flag for crashes, also saw red flag for weather as well. And then overnight on Saturday in Macau into Sunday morning, it saw lots of heavy rain. The track was, drenched, lots of standing water. And we started off the day, with very slowly. Unfortunately, the motorcycle Grand Prix of Macau ended up getting canceled, since it was just way too dangerous to try to put those riders out there, the wall so close together in those conditions. So understandably so. And then the Toyota GR Cup race, they ran the whole race behind the safety car and saw no actual race and whatever. And then one race, you had to start and suspend it and run it later. And at that point, you're just thinking, wow, are we really going to see the entire Macau Grand Prix canceled on the last day of race? And it was just a very disappointing slow start to the day. But once we got going, the racing was fantastic. If you haven't seen the FIA GT World Cup race, the end of that, just 2 laps to go, you have to go see that. That was a spectacular finish. Raffaele Marciello, Antonio Fuoco made a nice overtake on Marciello for the lead there. Almost reminded me of the move that Shane Van Gisbergen pulled on Justin Haley last year in the Chicago street race. It was a very smooth move. And then Raffaele Marciello, locked up on the brakes, got into Fuoco, ended up taking them both out of the running there. Although Marciello showed his onboard later on, showing Fuoco moving on the braking, suggesting that there should be a penalty there. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But all in all, just a really crazy ending there with Marciello getting in the back of Fuoco after he moved in the braking zone. I think Fuoco did move in the braking zone, but I guess that's a debate for another day. And because those two leaders took each other out, end up seeing the Mercedes factory driver Mauro Engel winning on the GT World Cup. And then shortly after that, we had a GT Cup race, and I think it was GT4 spec machinery there. And in that race, we saw a photo finish, which was also spectacular. And then the main event, the Macau Grand Prix itself, it was won by McLaren junior driver Ugo Chukwu. That was a very impressive victory by him, and to show the historical meaning of Ugo Chukwu's big win at the Macau Grand Prix. He became the first American driver in over 40 years to win this race, and the last American driver before Ugo Chukwu to win this race was Bob Earl in the year 1981. And we always like to point out, the list of winners of the Macau Grand Prix. Usually the driver who ends up winning the Macau Grand Prix, they may not make it to Formula One, but they usually end up, doing some really good things in racing. And because of past president, of the race winners at Macau, I'd encourage you all to follow Ugo Chukwu to see what he does in the future. And that's why the Macau Grand Prix was my one shining moment. Just really nice to see how this event, it looked like it was going to be a huge disappointment, a huge nod on Wednesday night, turned into a huge hot, and it was definitely worth the wait. I think you're muted, Joe.
Worth the wait. Glad the weather cooperated so we got to see some racing towards the tail end. And of course, we're at the end of our show, but Kobe will be on the air Wednesday. Grid tonight. Quite a lot of news that all developed Thursday, Friday to recap. Saturday, Grid live pre-race. Formula One is at Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Grand Prix World Rally Championship, their last race weekend of the year. And then we're going to be a little bit of a break. Thanksgiving break, of course. No racing on that following weekend. We'll be back on the air December for more Formula One. With that said, for Kobe Lambeth, I'm Joe Samuel. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and and enjoy the races.